She stood at the counter of Gate B42, holding a passport that unlocked boardrooms most people only dream of entering. But to the man behind the podium, she wasn't the CEO of the Vector Global Group. She was just an inconvenience with a thick accent. He thought he was protecting the brand by mocking her diction. He didn't know that the quiet woman he was humiliating was the sole signatory for a $950 million corporate travel contract, a contract expiring at midnight. By the time he realized his mistake, the stock price was already plummeting. This isn't just a story about bad customer service. It's about the most expensive ego trip in aviation history. The air inside JFK's Terminal 4 was thick with the scent of overpriced coffee and the palpable stress of holiday travel. Outside, the December wind whipped against the glass, but inside, the temperature was rising for entirely different reasons. Dr. Adana Akezie adjusted the silk scarf around her neck. It was a vintage Hermes, older than the man currently ignoring her at the Stratosphere Airlines priority desk, but she doubted he noticed. She wore no makeup. Her hair was pulled back into a practical, neat bun. She wore a comfortable, oversized cashmere sweater and black leggings, the uniform of a woman who had spent the last 48 hours inspecting shipping lanes in Lagos and was now desperate for sleep on the flight back to London. She didn't look like a billionaire. She didn't look like the woman Forbes had dubbed the logistics queen of the Atlantic. She just looked like a tired black woman standing in the wrong line. The man behind the counter, whose name tag read Brett Sterling, was meticulously typing on his keyboard. He was handsome in a generic corporate way, sharp jawline, perfectly gelled blonde hair, and a uniform that fit just a little too tightly around the biceps. He had been ignoring Adana for exactly 4 minutes. "Excuse me," Adana said, her voice soft but carrying the distinct, rhythmic cadence of her Nigerian upbringing, layered with the clipped precision of her Oxford education. "I believe I am next." Brett didn't look up. He held up a finger, continuing to type. A moment later, he looked past her shoulder to the man standing behind her, a tall, white man in a grey suit holding a briefcase. "Sir, can I help you?" "Priority boarding?" Brett asked, flashing a winning, customer service smile. The man in the suit looked uncomfortable. Actually, I think this lady was here first." Brett finally let his eyes drop to Adana. His smile evaporated instantly, replaced by a look of weary condescension. It was a look Adana knew well. It was the look that said, "You are lost. You are confused. You cannot possibly afford to be standing on this piece of red carpet." "Ma'am," Brett said, his voice dropping an octave, slowing down as if speaking to a child. "This is the first class line. Economy check-in is around the corner, near the restrooms. You see the blue sign?" He pointed vaguely to the left. Adana didn't move. She didn't blink. She placed her passport on the counter. It was a British passport, battered from use. "I'm aware of where economy is, Mr. Sterling," Adana said, reading his tag. "However, I am flying first. My name is Dr. Akezie." Brett let out a short, sharp exhale through his nose. A laugh stifled into a sigh. He picked up the passport with 2 fingers, as if it were contaminated. He flipped it open, barely glancing at the photo, and typed something into his terminal. "I'm not seeing a Dr. Akezie in our first class manifest," he lied. He didn't even hit enter. "Like I said, the system is very specific. Sometimes third-party budget sites mess up the bookings. If you bought your ticket on one of those cheap deal apps, it doesn't transfer to the priority list." "I didn't buy my ticket on a cheap deal app," Adana said, her patience fraying by a millimeter. "I booked directly through your corporate concierge, the Vector Global account." Brett froze. For a split second, a flicker of recognition crossed his face. Not of her, but of the account name. Vector Global was Stratosphere Airlines' largest corporate client. They moved thousands of engineers, executives, and consultants across the globe every month. But then he looked at her again. The oversized sweater, the lack of jewelry, the accent. No, he thought. Impossible. Look, Brett said, leaning forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was loud enough for the people behind them to hear. I don't know where you heard that name. Maybe you used to work there as a cleaner or admin. But dropping corporate names isn't going to get you an upgrade today. We are fully booked. Now, please, step aside so I can assist the actual paying customers. The man in the grey suit behind Adana stepped forward. Hey, buddy, you didn't even scan her boarding pass. Sir, I know how to do my job, Brett snapped, his veneer of politeness cracking. He turned his glare back to Adana. Ma'am, move, or I call security. Adana stared at him. She felt the familiar heat rising in her chest, the burning mixture of humiliation and righteous fury. But Adana Ekezi did not scream. She did not make scenes. She made acquisitions. She made divestments. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. I would like to speak to the station manager, she said calmly. I believe his name is Gavin O'Reilly. Is he on shift? Brett laughed out loud. You want Gavin? You think you can just demand the station manager? Ma'am, Gavin is dealing with important issues, not someone trying to scam a free glass of champagne. Last warning. Move. Adana didn't move. She unlocked her phone. She didn't dial customer service. She didn't dial the reservation line. She opened her contacts and scrolled to P. Private, Peter Arnott, CEO, Stratosphere Airlines. She hesitated. Calling Peter on a Sunday was the nuclear option. They served on the board of a charity trust together. They were tennis partners. She hated pulling rank. It felt tacky. Give him one more chance, she told herself. Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice hardening. I am asking you one last time to scan my passport properly. If you do not, you are going to set in motion a chain of events that you cannot stop. Please, just scan it. Brett looked at her. He looked at the line growing behind her. He felt the pressure. He felt the power of his little podium. He grabbed her passport again, not to scan it, but to shove it back across the counter toward her. I can't understand you, he said loudly. The terminal went quiet. The silence that followed Brett's comment was heavy, sharp, and suffocating. Excuse me? Adana asked, her voice dangerously low. I said I can't understand you, Brett repeated, performing for the audience now. He threw his hands up in a gesture of helpless frustration. Your accent, it's too thick. I can't understand a word you're saying. Is it scan it? Scam it? Span it? I don't know what you want, and I don't have a translator for whatever dialect this is. It was a lie. Her English was impeccable. It was better than his. But he was using the oldest weapon in the xenophobe's arsenal. Weaponized incompetence. He was stripping her of her intellect by pretending her voice was invalid. Adana stood very still. The insult wasn't just about her speech. It was about her history. Her father who taught at the University of Ibadan. Her mother who read Shakespeare to her in the cradle. It was a rejection of her identity. My accent, Adana stated, is not the issue, Mr. Sterling. Your hearing seems selective. See? There it is again, Brett chuckled, looking at the man in the grey suit for validation. The man didn't smile. He looked horrified. It's just mumbling. Look, honey, this is America. We speak English here. If you want first-class service, you need to learn to communicate clearly. Maybe try Rosetta Stone before you try to fly Stratosphere. Someone in the line gasped. A woman further back pulled out her phone and started recording. Brett, oblivious to the camera, leaned over the counter, his face inches from Adana's. "Now take your passport, take your little bag, and go to economy where the agents are used to dealing with difficult communication barriers. You're holding up the line." Adana picked up her passport. Her hand did not shake. "Very well," she said. "Finally," Brett muttered, straightening his tie. "Next, please." Adana didn't go to economy. She stepped out of the line, moved 3 feet to the side, and leaned against the glass wall overlooking the tarmac. She watched the Stratosphere Boeing 777-300 ER being loaded with cargo. She looked at her phone. She saw the time. 4:15 p.m. The contract renewal for the Vector Global Group, a massive logistics conglomerate that Adana owned 60% of, was due to auto-renew at midnight tonight. It was a deal worth $950 million over 5 years. It covered all cargo transport, corporate travel, and freight logistics for Stratosphere Airlines. Vector Global was the backbone of Stratosphere's cargo revenue. Adana pressed the call button for Jonathan Vance, her chief financial officer. He picked up on the first ring. "Adana, you should be in the air. Everything okay?" "Jonathan," she said, her voice icy calm. "Pause the auto-renewal on the Stratosphere contract." There was a pause on the other end. A confused silence. "I'm sorry, did you say pause?" "Adana, the system triggers at midnight. The legal team has already signed off. The press release goes out tomorrow morning. What's going on?" "I didn't say pause it for review, Jonathan. I said, kill it." "Kill it?" Jonathan's voice cracked. "Adana, that's nearly $1 billion. It's the cornerstone of our Q1 projections. If we pull out, Stratosphere takes a massive hit, but we'll have a logistical nightmare rerouting to Delta or United. Why? Did they lose a shipment?" Adana looked at Brett Sterling, who was now bowing and scraping to the man in the grey suit, laughing loudly at a joke that wasn't funny. "They didn't lose a shipment," Adana said, her eyes locked on Brett. "They lost their dignity, and they just insulted the CEO of their largest client." "Who? Who insulted you?" "A gate agent, name of Brett Sterling. He told me he couldn't understand my dialect, and that I should try Rosetta Stone. He refused to check me in." "Jesus," Jonathan breathed. "Okay, I'll call their VP of sales right now. We can get this guy fired in 10 minutes, Adana. You don't need to nuke the whole deal." "No," Adana commanded. "Do not call the VP. Do not call anyone. I want you to initiate the termination clause immediately. Send the notification to their legal department. Use the gross negligence and brand damage clause." "And Jonathan?" "Yes?" "Transfer the entire freight account to Lufthansa. Tonight. I want every pallet of cargo currently sitting in Stratosphere holding bays pulled out before my flight departs." "Adana, that is going to cause a riot at JFK. Their stock is going to tank." "I know," Adana said. "I'll handle the board. Just send the email. And Jonathan, copy Peter Arnott on it." "Done." Adana hung up. She didn't leave. She stood there, watching the chaos she had just silently unleashed. She watched Brett Sterling check in passenger after passenger, smug and self-satisfied, completely unaware that he had just cost his company nearly $1 billion. 10 minutes passed. The line dwindled. Adana remained by the window. Suddenly, the phone on Brett's desk rang. Not the standard internal line, the red phone. The emergency line from operations. Brett frowned. He picked it up. "Gate B42, Sterling speaking." Adana couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but she watched the color drain from Brett's face. It started at his chin and washed up to his hairline, leaving him a pale, ghostly white. "What?" Brett stammered. "No, sir, I don't know what you mean. Cancelled? All of it? He listened for another moment, his eyes darting around the terminal nervously. A woman? Brett whispered into the phone. Who? He looked up. His eyes scanned the waiting area. They swept past the business travelers, the families, and then they landed on the woman in the oversized sweater leaning against the glass. Adana held his gaze. She didn't smile. She raised her phone and tapped her wrist, indicating the time. Brett dropped the phone. It dangled by the cord, swinging back and forth, hitting the side of the desk with a dull thud. 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 A man in a high-visibility vest burst through the jet bridge door behind Brett. It was Gavin O'Reilly, the station manager. He looked frantic. He was sweating. "Sterling!" Gavin roared. "Who did you just turn away? Corporate just called. The Vector Global contract just got pulled. Arnott is on the line from his house. He's screaming about a Dr. Akizi. Where is she?" Brett's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He pointed a shaking finger toward the window. Gavin spun around. He saw Adana. He recognized her instantly from the company newsletters, from the VIP briefings. "Oh, God," Gavin whispered. He ran toward her, bypassing the stanchions, tripping slightly over his own feet. Brett stood frozen behind the podium, the realization crashing down on him like a tidal wave. He hadn't just rejected a passenger. He had rejected the payroll. "Dr. Akizi!" Gavin panted, skidding to a halt in front of her. "Dr. Akizi, please! There has been a terrible mistake. I am Gavin O'Reilly. I'm the station manager. Please come with me to the lounge. We can fix this." Adana looked at Gavin, then passed him to Brett. Brett was staring at her with terror in his eyes. "The mistake was indeed terrible, Mr. O'Reilly," Adana said, her voice projecting clearly now. "But it is too late to fix it. My CFO has already executed the cancellation." "Please," Gavin begged, his hands clasping together. "Mr. Sterling, he's new. He's an idiot. We can fire him. Right now. I'll strip his badge right here. Just please don't walk away." Adana took a step closer to Gavin, but her eyes remained on Brett. "I am not walking away, Mr. O'Reilly. I am flying. But not with Stratosphere. I have just purchased a seat on British Airways. It leaves in 40 minutes from Terminal 7. She adjusted her bag on her shoulder. "However," she added, "before I go, I think your Mr. Sterling has something he would like to say to me. In English, since he had such trouble understanding me earlier." The silence at Gate B42 was no longer the silence of confusion. It was the silence of a courtroom right before the gavel drops. Gavin O'Reilly, a man who had managed through snowstorms, union strikes, and terror alerts, looked as though he was about to vomit. He turned to Brett Sterling. "Get out here," Gavin hissed, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and panic. "Now." Brett hesitated. For the first time, the glass wall of his podium didn't feel like a shield. It felt like a cage. He opened the side door and stepped onto the red carpet, the same carpet he had barred Adana from. Standing at eye level, without the elevation of his desk, he looked smaller. His shoulders were slumped, his expensive gelled hair suddenly looking like a cheap costume. "Apologize," Gavin commanded, "and you better pray to God she accepts it." Brett looked at Adana. He tried to summon the arrogance he had displayed just 10 minutes ago, the sneering superiority he reserved for passengers he deemed lesser. But looking at Dr. Adana Akizi now, with the station manager quaking beside her and the entire terminal watching, the power dynamic had shifted so violently it made him dizzy. Brett started. He cleared his throat. "I'm sorry if there was a misunderstanding about your ticket." Adana laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "A misunderstanding," she repeated, tilting her head. "No, Mr. Sterling. A misunderstanding is when you mishear a seat number. What you did was an assessment. You assessed my clothes, my skin, and my accent, and you calculated that I was worth nothing. You decided I was a liar because I didn't fit your narrow definition of wealth. I was just following protocol regarding ID verification. Brett lied, his eyes darting to the passengers filming him. The system had nothing to do with it, Gavin roared, making Brett flinch. I checked the logs, Sterling. You didn't even try to retrieve the PNR. You just refreshed the screen. Gavin turned back to Adana, desperation leaking from his pores. Dr. Akizi, please. We can upgrade you to the presidential suite on the A380. I'll clear the whole row. I will personally escort you. Just, please call your CFO back. The board... Mr. Arnott. Adana held up a hand. Mr. O'Reilly, you seem to be under the impression that this is a negotiation. It is not. It is a departure. She took a step toward Brett, closing the distance until she was just inches from him. She smelled of sandalwood and old money. You said you couldn't understand me, Adana said softly, but her voice carried to the back of the line. You mocked my diction. You told me to use Rosetta Stone. So I want to make sure you understand me perfectly now. Do you know what Vector Global does, Mr. Sterling? Brett shook his head mutely. We move things, she said. We move food to famine zones. We move vaccines to pandemics. And we move the very engines that power the planes you stand in front of. By cancelling my contract, I haven't just taken away your profit. I have taken away your infrastructure. You wanted me to go to economy? Mr. Sterling, because of you, this entire airline is about to be an economy. Brett blinked, the colour draining further from his face. I didn't know. Ignorance is not a defence, she said. It is a liability, and you are too expensive to keep. She turned to Gavin. I am leaving now. I suggest you answer your phone. It's ringing again. Gavin looked down at the red phone on the desk, which had started flashing violently. He didn't pick it up. He grabbed his own mobile, which was also vibrating. It was Peter Arnott again. Gavin answered, putting it on speaker without thinking, his hands shaking too much to hold it up to his ear. Gavin! The CEO's voice boomed through the quiet gate area. Status, I'm looking at the server logs. Did the Vector API just go dark? Why are we getting cancellation notices from the London freight hub? Talk to me. Sir, Gavin croaked. I'm with her. Dr. Akizi. Put her on. Give her the damn phone. Gavin extended the phone toward Adana like a peace offering. Dr. Akizi, please, it's Peter. Adana looked at the phone. She remembered the dinner parties she had attended with Peter. She remembered how he had bragged about Stratosphere's commitment to excellence. Tell Peter, Adana said, refusing to take the device, that he should have invested more in staff training and less in stock buybacks. Tell him his frontline defense just cost him the war. She adjusted her scarf. Good luck, gentlemen. With that, Adana Akatsiye turned her back on gate B42. She walked past the stunned crowd. As she passed the line of passengers, a young woman in a hoodie, the one who had been filming, started to clap. Slowly at first, then louder. Then a man joined in. Then another. Adana didn't look back. She walked with the regal grace of a queen, leaving a court that was no longer worthy of her presence. Behind her, the chaos finally broke loose. No, wait, Dr. Akatsiye, Gavin shouted, trying to run after her, but he was blocked by the angry mob of first-class passengers who were now demanding to know if their flights were also going to be cancelled. Brett stood alone in the middle of the storm. He looked at the computer screen. A notification popped up in the corner. System alert. Global account suspension. Vector global. Priority level critical. Status terminated. Brett felt his knees buckle. He sat down on the floor of the gate, right on the dirty red carpet. The true magnitude of a disaster is rarely felt in the moment of impact. It is felt in the ripples. Adana Ekezi boarded British Airways Flight 178 to London Heathrow 40 minutes later. She was welcomed by name, ushered to her seat, and given a glass of vintage Bollinger. She turned off her phone. She slept peacefully for 7 hours. But while she slept, the world below her was burning. This is where the twist happened. Most people thought Adana's revenge was simply money. The $950 million travel contract. That was a lot of money, yes. Enough to ruin a quarterly earnings report. But Adana Ekezi wasn't just a travel client. She was the logistics queen. At 2:00 a.m., in the Stratosphere Airlines Operations Center, the Ops Room in Dallas, a red light began to blink on the central maintenance board. The night director, a man named Carl Henson, sipped his lukewarm coffee and frowned. "What's that blinking on the London-Dubai leg? Flight 802? A junior analyst typed furiously. Maintenance flag, sir. The 777 in Dubai needs a replacement turbine blade assembly. Standard wear and tear. They can't fly without it." "Okay," Carl said, rubbing his eyes. "So, ship the part. We have spares in the Leeds warehouse. Get it on the next cargo flight out." The analyst typed some more, then stopped, then typed again, harder. "Sir, what? I can't generate the shipping manifest." "What do you mean you can't generate it? Just click Dispatch." "I am clicking it, sir. It's giving me an error code. Carrier blocked." Carl stood up and walked over to the analyst station. "Who is the logistics partner for the Leeds warehouse?" The analyst pulled up the vendor file. Vector Global Logistics. "Vector," Carl muttered. "Okay, try the backup. Try the Singapore hub." Checking Singapore. Vendor, Vector Global Asia. Status, blocked. Carl felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Try the Los Angeles Parts Depot. Vendor, Vector Global Americas. Status, blocked. Carl grabbed the desk phone. "Get me procurement, now." Within an hour, the horrifying truth had spread from the ops room to the executive suite. Stratosphere Airlines didn't own their own shipping lanes. To save money, 5 years ago, they had outsourced their entire supply chain logistics to a single partner to streamline costs. That partner was Vector Global. Adana Ekezi didn't just buy tickets for her staff. She moved Stratosphere's organs. When she told Jonathan Vance to transfer the freight account to Lufthansa, she wasn't just talking about her own company's products. She was talking about the exclusivity clause. Vector Global immediately ceased all movements for Stratosphere. The twist was operational paralysis. By 6 a.m. Monday morning, 7 Stratosphere wide-body jets were grounded in various airports around the world, Tokyo, Dubai, Frankfurt, and Sao Paulo, awaiting critical maintenance parts that were sitting in warehouses, locked behind a digital wall that said, "Account suspended." Those 7 planes represented 12% of the airline's long-haul capacity. In New York, Peter Arnott sat in his office, his head in his hands. The sun was rising over the skyline, but it looked grey to him. His VP of Legal, a sharp-edged woman named Sarah Jenkins, threw a file on his desk. "It's ironclad, Peter," she said grimly. "The contract has a goodwill and professional conduct clause. It's usually there so we can fire clients who abuse our staff, but the wording is reciprocal. If our representatives cause significant reputational harm or indignity to the client's executive leadership, they can terminate with cause. No penalty fees." "He mocked her accent," Peter whispered. "He told her to use Rosetta Stone." "And it's on TikTok," Sarah added, pulling out her tablet. "Trending. Our Stratosphere racist. 4.2 million views in 6 hours. The video shows everything. Brett Sterling doing a caricature of a deaf person, then Adana delivering the kill shot." Peter looked at the screen. He saw the stock ticker in the corner of the news feed. Stratosphere Airlines, $42.50 for 18.4%. 18%, Peter groaned. That's $3 billion in market cap. Gone, because a gate agent wanted to feel important. It gets worse, Sarah said. Lufthansa just put out a press release. They are welcoming Vector Global as their exclusive platinum partner. They're already moving the freight. Stratosphere parts are currently stuck in customs because Vector pulled the bonded carrier licenses. We can't move our own engines, Peter. Peter stood up and walked to the window. He looked down at the tarmac of JFK, where he could see Stratosphere planes lining up. "Where is he?" Peter asked, his voice devoid of emotion. "Who?" "Sterling. The agent. He's in the break room in Terminal 4. Gavin confiscated his badge, but union rules say we have to do a formal review before termination." Peter laughed. It was a terrifying sound. Union rules. "Sarah, I want you to go down there. I want you to fire him for gross misconduct. I want you to sue him for damages. And I want you to make sure that the only thing he ever flies again is a paper kite." Back at Terminal 4, the atmosphere in the break room was funeral. Brett sat at a plastic table, staring at a cup of vending machine coffee. He knew it was bad. He knew he was probably fired. But he was still clinging to a shred of denial. "It's just one customer," he told himself. "The union will protect me." I was stressed. They can't blame me for the stock market. The door opened. It wasn't Gavin. It was Sarah Jenkins, flanked by 2 large security guards and a man in a suit who looked like he charged by the minute. Brett stood up. "Look, I can explain." "Sit down," Sarah said. She didn't shout. She spoke with the quiet efficiency of an executioner. She slammed a document on the table. "Letter of termination, effective immediately, cause, gross misconduct, discrimination, and material breach of company values, resulting in catastrophic financial loss." "Catastrophic?" Brett scoffed nervously. "Come on." She was just one lady. Sarah pulled a remote from her pocket and turned on the break room TV. It was tuned to CNBC. The headline on the bottom of the screen read, "Stratosphere Crisis. CEO admits logistics failure." Stock halted after 20% drop. The news anchor was speaking. "Analysts are calling this the most expensive customer service error in aviation history. The cancellation of the Vector Global contract has not only removed nearly $1 billion in revenue, but has grounded Stratosphere's fleet due to supply chain freezes. All because of an incident at JFK yesterday." Sarah turned the TV off. She looked at Brett. "You didn't just insult one lady, Mr. Sterling. You insulted the supply chain. You cost us $3 billion in 6 hours. You are currently the most expensive liability in New York City." Brett's mouth fell open. The denial shattered. The reality of what he had done crashed into him. The $950 million wasn't just the travel money, it was the lifeblood of the airline. And he had severed the artery because he didn't like the way she sounded. "Surrender your badge," Sarah said. Brett's hands shook as he unclipped his ID. He placed it on the table. "Escort him out," Sarah told the guards, "and take him out the public exit. Let the press see him." "Wait," Brett panicked. "The public exit? There are cameras out there. You can't throw me to the wolves." Sarah smiled, a cold, razor-sharp smile. "You wanted to be the gatekeeper, Brett. Now you can go meet the people." As the guards grabbed his arms, Brett realized the true horror of his situation. It wasn't just losing the job. His face was everywhere. The Rosetta Stone guy. He was about to walk out of those doors and into a world that had seen him at his absolute worst. And in the age of the internet never forgets. 1 year later, The lobby of the Vector Global headquarters in London was a testament to modern power. It was all glass, steel, and silent efficiency. In the center of the atrium stood a new art installation, a massive abstract globe made of interwoven shipping routes, glowing in soft amber light. Dr. Adana Akezi walked past it, her heels clicking rhythmically on the marble. She looked different than she had that day at JFK. She looked rested. The burden of being unheard had lifted, replaced by the weight of responsibility that she carried with effortless grace. In the boardroom on the 40th floor, the atmosphere was celebratory. Q-Force earnings are up 22%, Jonathan Vance said, projecting a chart onto the wall. The partnership with Lufthansa has been seamless. Our freight reliability score is at an all-time high of 999.8%. Adana nodded, sipping her water. And the stratosphere account? What is the status of the debt recovery? The room quieted. Jonathan clicked to the next slide. It showed a graph line, plummeting like a stone dropped from a cliff. They are currently in Chapter 11 bankruptcy restructuring, Jonathan said, his voice devoid of pity. After we pulled the logistics infrastructure, their on-time performance dropped to 60%. They lost the business travel segment almost overnight. Peter Arnott was ousted by the board 3 months ago. The new CEO is trying to pivot them to a budget holiday carrier, but the brand damage is extensive. Adana looked at the red line. She felt no joy, only a cold sense of justice. It was a mathematical proof she had known all along. Respect is a currency. If you spend it recklessly, you go bankrupt. They have reached out, Jonathan continued, the new management. They want to know if we would consider reopening the bidding for the logistics contract. They are offering a 15% premium on our standard rates. Adana stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the London skyline. She thought about the man in the grey suit who had stepped in front of her. She thought about the laughter. She thought about the feeling of being invisible. "Tell them no," Adana said softly. "Just no?" Jonathan asked. "It's a lot of money, Adana." "Tell them," she turned, her eyes steel, "that our accent is still too thick for their operations." Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the man who had started the fire was living in the ashes. Brett Sterling sat on the edge of a sagging mattress in a basement apartment in Queens. The air smelled of damp drywall and stale takeout. His blonde hair, once perfectly gelled, was now overgrown and shaggy. He hadn't bought hair gel in 6 months. Hair gel was a luxury. He stared at his laptop screen. It was open to LinkedIn. Brett S. Open to work experience, customer service specialist, 5 years. He didn't list Stratosphere Airlines by name anymore. He just wrote, major international carrier. It didn't matter. Everyone knew. The video, the damning, vertical video footage of him mocking Dr. Akezi, had accumulated 45 million views. It had been remixed, memed, and studied in HR training seminars. He was the face of implicit bias. He was the Rosetta Stone guy. He clicked on his Sent Applications folder. Application to Marriott Hotels. Rejected. Application to Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Rejected. Application to Starbucks. Rejected. Even the automated systems seemed to know who he was. Or maybe it was just the background checks. When you Google Brett Sterling JFK, the first page of results wasn't his high school track times anymore. It was articles from the New York Times, BBC, and BuzzFeed dissecting his public shaming. His phone buzzed. It was his landlord. "Rent is 3 days late. Don't make me start the eviction process again, Brett." Brett put his head in his hands. He had lost his condo. He had lost his girlfriend. She didn't want to be seen with that racist guy from the internet. He had lost his friends, who found his notoriety too exhausting to defend. He needed a job. Any job. He couldn't work in customer service. His face was a liability. He couldn't work in an office. His resume was radioactive. He scrolled down to the bottom of the job board, past the manager roles, past the associate roles, down to the manual labor section. Entry-level warehouse associate, Bronx distribution center, night shift, heavy lifting required, 18-hour, no customer interaction. No customer interaction, Brett whispered. Perfect. He clicked. Apply. 2 days later, Brett sat in a plastic chair in a waiting room that smelled of diesel and cardboard. He was wearing a generic polo shirt and khakis. He had shaved, trying to look like the fresh-faced young man he used to be. But the stress lines around his eyes betrayed him. The warehouse was massive. Forklifts beeped in the distance. The sound of packing tape ripping was constant. Mr. Sterling? Brett jumped. A woman stood at the door. She was short, wearing a high-visibility vest over a blazer. She held a clipboard. She was black, with dreadlocks pulled back in a colourful wrap. Brett felt a spike of panic. Does she know? He stood up, keeping his head down, avoiding eye contact. Yes, that's me. I'm Mrs. Adebayo. I'm the floor manager. Come on back. He followed her into a small, cluttered office. She sat down behind a metal desk and flipped through his printed application. It says here you have 5 years of experience in aviation operations, she said, looking at the resume where he had tried to vague up his past. Why the switch to warehouse labor? It's a big step down in pay, and it's brutal on the back. I just need a change of pace, Brett stammered. I prefer working with my hands. I want to be behind the scenes. Mrs. Adebayo looked at him over the rim of her glasses. She studied his face. She frowned slightly, tilting her head. You look familiar, she said. Brett's heart hammered against his ribs. I just have one of those faces. She hummed, unconvinced. She turned back to the paper. Well, we need bodies. The Christmas rush is coming, and we are moving volume like crazy. The shift is 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. You get 2 15-minute breaks and a 30-minute lunch. 0 tolerance for lateness. 0 tolerance for theft. I can do that, Brett said eagerly. I'm very punctual. Are you? Mrs. Adebayo asked. She typed something into her computer. We do a standard background check, obviously. But we also do a social media audit. It's corporate policy. Brett froze. Is that necessary for a warehouse job? I'm just moving boxes. We handle sensitive shipments, she said. High-value electronics, pharmaceuticals. Our clients demand integrity. She hit enter on her keyboard. Brett watched her eyes scan the screen. He saw the moment it happened. He saw her eyebrows shoot up. He saw her mouth tighten. She stopped typing. She slowly took her hands off the keyboard and folded them on the desk. The silence in the small office was deafening. Stratosphere Airlines, she said. It wasn't a question. Brett closed his eyes. Look, Mrs. Adebayo, please. It was a bad day. It was edited out of context. I just need a job. I will stack boxes. I will sweep the floors. I won't speak to anyone. Please. I am about to be homeless. Mrs. Adebayo stared at him. She didn't look angry. She looked disappointed. Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice calm and rich. Do you know who owns this distribution center? It's a logistics company. Swift Packet, right? Swift Packet is the DBA, she said. The parent company acquired us 6 months ago to handle their North American ground freight. She pointed to the calendar on the wall behind her. Brett turned to look. It was a standard corporate calendar. But at the top, printed in bold, elegant blue letters, was the logo. Vector Global Logistics, a Dr. Adana Ekezi company. The blood drained from Brett's face so fast, He felt lightheaded. He was sitting in the belly of the beast. He was asking for a job in the very empire he had tried to humiliate. "You have got to be kidding me," he whispered. "Dr. Akedzie is very particular about the culture of her companies," Mrs. Adebayo said. "She believes that the people who handle the packages are just as important as the people who sign for them. We have a dignity mandate here." She slid his application back across the desk toward him. "I cannot hire you, Mr. Sterling." "Because of a video?" Brett pleaded, tears pricking his eyes. "I'm begging you. I have nothing." "Not because of the video," Mrs. Adebayo corrected him. "Because of the liability. If our CEO walks through this floor, and she does, she inspects her own lines, and she sees you, it would be an insult to her. And I will not insult the woman who gave me this job." She stood up. "You can show yourself out." The walk from Mrs. Adebayo's office to the warehouse exit was the longest 200 yards of Brett Sterling's life. Inside the massive distribution center, the air was alive with the hum of commerce. Conveyor belts whirred like mechanical rivers, carrying thousands of packages, brown cardboard boxes stamped with the blue Vector Global logo. Each box represented a promise kept, a connection made, a job done right, and Brett was being expelled from it. He pushed through the heavy metal turnstile, the mechanism clicking shut behind him, with a sound that felt final. Click. Lock. He stepped out into the Bronx night. The December wind was far crueler here than it had been at JFK Terminal 4. At the airport, the cold was something you watched through double-paned glass while sipping a latte. Here, in the industrial wasteland of Hunts Point, the cold was a physical assault. It cut through his thin discount store jacket and settled deep in his bones. Brett checked his phone. 11:15 p.m. The next BX6 bus wasn't due for 20 minutes. He wrapped his arms around himself and began to walk toward the bus stop, a lonely concrete island under the flickering yellow light of a street lamp. His reflection caught in a puddle of oily water on the asphalt. He looked haggard. The sharp, arrogant jawline that had looked so good in a Stratosphere Airlines uniform was now covered in patchy stubble. His eyes were hollowed out by months of insomnia. He sat on the freezing metal bench, the iron sapping the last of the warmth from his legs. How did it come to this, he thought, the bitterness rising in his throat like bile. 1 minute. It was just 1 minute of my life. But he knew, deep down, it wasn't just 1 minute. It was a lifetime of thinking he was better. It was a lifetime of judging people by the cut of their clothes and the cadence of their vowels. He had spent his career building walls to keep undesirables out of the VIP lounge. Now the walls were built around him, and there was no door. As he sat there, shivering, the warehouse shift change whistle blew. A moment later, the side doors of the Vector facility burst open. A group of about a dozen workers poured out, bringing with them a wave of noise and laughter that seemed to push back the night. They were the people Brett had spent his life ignoring. They were black, Hispanic, Asian, Eastern European. They wore heavy work boots and high visibility vests. They looked tired, but their spirits were light. They had just finished a crush shift, moving high-volume holiday cargo, and the adrenaline of a job well done was still pumping through them. They congregated at the bus stop, surrounding Brett but not acknowledging him. To them, he was just a shadow on the bench. Man, that last pallet was heavy, eh? A tall man with a thick Jamaican accent laughed, lighting a cigarette. But we cleared it. Mrs. Adebayo said we hit 110% efficiency. Bonus coming next week. Bonus, a woman replied, her voice singing with a heavy Ghanaian lilt. I am buying that heater for my mother. Finally. You and that heater, a third man teased in rapid-fire Spanish. Buy her a ticket to DR instead. It's warmer. The group erupted in laughter. Brett shrank into his coat. The accents, the very thing he had mocked Adana Akezi for, was now the soundtrack of his exclusion. These people he would have once directed to the economy check-in with a sneer, were discussing bonuses, heating, travel, families. They had dignity. They had a place. One of the workers, the tall Jamaican man, noticed the figure huddled on the bench. He saw the shaking shoulders. He saw the cheap shoes. The laughter died down a little. The man stepped closer to Brett. "Yo, boss," the man said, his voice dropping to a kind, rumbling baritone. "You all right there? You looking like an icicle, man." Brett's heart hammered against his ribs. Panic seized him. It wasn't the fear of violence. It was the terror of recognition. "Don't look at me," Brett prayed. "Please don't know who I am." If they recognized him, what would happen? Would they film him? Would they mock him? Would he end up on TikTok again? The Rosetta Stone guy shivering at a bus stop? The internet never forgave, and it never forgot. "Hey," the man tried again, stepping into the pool of light. "You need a light? Or maybe a swipe for the bus? I got an extra transfer." It was an act of charity, pure, unadulterated human kindness offered to a stranger in the cold. A year ago, Brett would have scoffed at it. Now, it was more than he could afford. Brett looked up, keeping his face half hidden by his collar. He opened his mouth to say, "No, thank you." But the words stuck. He realized with a jolt of horror that he was afraid to speak. He was afraid that his voice, his polished, American, proper voice, would betray him. He was afraid that his diction would identify him as the man who hated accents. The irony crashed down on him with the weight of a falling jet engine. He had silenced Adana Akezi because he didn't like how she spoke. Now he was silencing himself because he was ashamed of who he was. No, Brett mumbled, slurring his words intentionally, looking at the ground. "Fine." The Jamaican man frowned, leaning in. "Say again?" "I didn't catch that, brother." Brett flinched. The words echoed in his head. "I didn't catch that." It was the polite version of, "I can't understand you." "I said I'm fine," Brett snapped, his voice cracking, the fear turning into a jagged edge of defensiveness. The worker held up his hands, palms open. All right. Chill out, man. Just trying to help. No need to be rude." The group turned their backs on him. The circle of warmth closed, leaving Brett on the outside. "Some people," the woman whispered loudly. "So miserable. Let him freeze if he wants to be like that." Brett closed his eyes. Tears, hot and stinging, leaked out and tracked cold paths down his cheeks. He had done it again. Even at rock bottom, his instinct was to push people away. Suddenly, a low rumble shook the ground. The bus wasn't coming yet. It was something bigger. Brett looked up. Turning the corner from the warehouse loading dock was a massive 18-wheel tractor trailer. It was a brand new Kenworth, gleaming under the streetlights. The side of the trailer was a canvas of white, emblazoned with the massive logo that now haunted his nightmares. Vector Global Logistics connecting the world. The truck was so big, it blocked out the sky. As it rumbled past the bus stop, the air brakes hissed, a sound like a long, disappointed sigh. Brett looked up at the cab. Through the window, high above him, he saw the driver. It was an older black woman, wearing a headset, commanding that massive machine with effortless skill. She looked down at the bus stop, her gaze sweeping over the huddled workers and the lonely man on the bench. She didn't stop. She didn't care. She had a schedule to keep. She had a contract to fulfill. The truck accelerated, kicking up a spray of dirty slush from the gutter. Splat! The freezing grey sludge hit Brett's legs, soaking his khakis, seeping into his socks. The workers jumped back, laughing, dodging the spray. "Whoa! Watch out! That's the Midnight Express to JFK." Brett didn't move. He just looked down at his ruined trousers. He looked at the tail lights of the Vector Global truck fading into the distance, heading toward the airport he was banned from, carrying the cargo he used to manage, driven by the people he used to mock. The BX6 bus finally crested the hill. It was crowded, steaming, and loud. The workers grabbed their bags. "Come on, let's go. It's warm inside." They filed onto the bus, swiping their cards, greeting the driver. They moved to the back, finding seats together. Brett stood up. His legs were numb. He fumbled in his pocket for his Metro card. His fingers were so cold he dropped it. It landed in the slush. He stared at it. "Hey, buddy, you getting on or what?" the bus driver yelled. "I got a schedule." Brett bent down, picking up the wet, dirty card. He wiped it on his sleeve, but it was smeared with grease. He stepped onto the bus. He dipped the card. "Beep, beep, insufficient fare." The sound was loud in the quiet bus. "Read it again," the driver said, bored. Brett dipped it again. "Beep, beep, insufficient fare." He had forgotten. The background check fee? The agency had deducted it from his account automatically this morning. He was overdrawn by $4. Brett looked at the driver. Then he looked past him, down the aisle. The group of workers was watching him. The Jamaican man who had offered him a transfer earlier was watching him. Brett could have asked. He could have swallowed his pride and asked for that transfer. But the shame was a wall he couldn't climb. Brett whispered. "I don't have it." "Then you got to get off, pal," the driver said, closing the doors halfway. "Rules are rules." Brett Sterling turned around. He stepped off the bus, back into the cold. The doors hissed shut behind him. He stood on the curb and watched the tail lights of the bus disappear, carrying the warmth, the laughter, and the humanity away from him. He was alone. He was silent. And in the vast, indifferent economy of the real world, he had finally learned his place. He wasn't a VIP. He wasn't priority. He was just a man standing in the cold, waiting for a ride that wasn't coming, silenced by the echo of his own voice. In the end, Dr. Adana Ekazia proved that true power doesn't need to shout to be heard. It simply needs to act. Brett Sterling learned the hard way that when you try to make someone else feel small, you are often the one who disappears. In a connected world, dignity is the most valuable currency we have. Treat everyone like a VIP, because you never know who is holding the contract to your future. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that kindness costs nothing, but rudeness can cost you everything. Thanks for watching.